Todd Kohlhepp, a notorious serial killer, committed a string of gruesome murders between 2003 and 2016. During this time, he also made disturbing comments about some of his weapons on the internet. In terms of murderers and serial killers, this guy ranks really high on the list, which leads us to think, what kind of gruesome acts did he commit? On the surface, Todd Kohlhepp seemed to have a successful and put-together life. He had 2 degrees and worked as a graphic designer, and even started a real estate company in South Carolina with several employees. In addition to this, he was learning to fly planes and owned almost 100 acres of land. However, it wasn't until years later that anyone discovered that he was actually a serial killer. Despite his professional appearance, Kohlhepp struggled with anger and cruelty from a young age, with his father stating that the only emotion he knew was fury. Kohlhepp's violent tendencies first emerged when he was 15 years old, when he abducted and raped a girl in Tempe, Arizona at gunpoint. After being sentenced to 15 years in prison, he was released in 2001 and went on to commit murder 7 times. Despite being experienced homicide detectives, the detectives handling Kohlhepp's case were surprised by the unique aspects of his crimes. He was nicknamed the Amazon Review Killer by the media, as it left behind unsettling comments on Amazon about some of the products he used in his killings. Todd Christopher Samsell, also known as Todd Kohlhepp, was born on March 7, 1971 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. His parents divorced when he was just 2 years old, and his mother, Regina Teague, later married Carl Kohlhepp, who legally became his stepfather in 1976. As a child, Kohlhepp exhibited disturbing behaviors while living in South Carolina and Georgia with his mother and stepfather. He was known to be a bully and would destroy the school projects of his classmates. He was also removed from the Boy Scouts due to his bad behavior, and even killed a goldfish with bleach and shot a local dog with a BB gun. But what was happening with Kohlhepp was a lot deeper than what most people knew. FBI investigators later found that Kohlhepp was actually the victim of bullying at home. He was abused, abandoned. His grandfather hit him with a cattle prod, said FBI agent John Douglas. Even in elementary school, he was a bully. By the time he was 9, he ended up in a mental hospital. He was very, very angry and combative. He really became the product of this very dysfunctional family. Kohlhepp had a difficult relationship with his stepfather and yearned to live with his biological father instead. He underwent counseling for a few years before finally getting his wish in 1983. With his mother going through her second divorce, it was decided that Kohlhepp should live with his father in Tempe, Arizona. Unfortunately, this did not turn out as it hoped. Although he initially enjoyed learning how to blow things up and make bombs with his father, Kohlhepp eventually came to dislike him as well. This was because his father spent most of his time on dates, leaving Kohlhepp feeling abandoned. When he asked his mother and stepfather to take him back home, they made excuses to keep him in Tempe. His anger got out of hand and eventually led to him committing murder 7 times. He was eventually caught and sentenced for his crimes. While his father was away, Kohlhepp tricked a local girl into leaving her house by claiming her boyfriend wanted to speak with her. He then brought her to his home and threatened her with a .22 caliber revolver, tying up her limbs with rope and taping her mouth shut. After raping her, he took her back home and warned her that he would kill her family if she told anyone what had happened. Kohlhepp was arrested shortly after the incident and diagnosed with a borderline personality disorder. His psychiatric evaluation revealed that he had signs of emotional disturbance but was not psychotic and had an IQ of 118. When asked why he'd raped the girl, he said it was because he was angry at his father. He claimed that none of his 3 guardians visited him in jail. But from all points of view, that is still not a good reason to do what he did. After the juvenile probation officer recommended that Kohlhepp be tried as an adult, he agreed to a plea deal that would dismiss the sexual assault charge but require him to register as a sex offender. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison on January 19, 1987, with the judge delivering a stern warning. At less than the age of 9, this juvenile was impulsive, explosive, and preoccupied with sexual content. He has not changed. He's been unabatedly aggressive to others and destructive of property since nursery school. After being released from prison in August 2001, the 30-year-old convict moved to Spartanburg, South Carolina. He obtained his first driver's license and found a job at the Seven Sons & Co. sports apparel business by lying about his employment history on his resume. On November 6, 2003, the Amazon Review killer added murder to his list of crimes. It is believed that he was laughed out of the Superbike Motorsports store for trying to return a bike and then returned with a gun, killing the store's owner Scott Ponder, who was 30 years old, and his mother Beverly, who was 52, the manager Brian Lucas, who was 29, and the mechanic Chris Sherbert, who was 26. Kohlhepp was able to evade justice for over a decade, but eventually began publicly sharing his thoughts online, using a profile called simply Me. He created an Amazon wish list of products to review, including chainsaws. His comments on these products revealed his violent tendencies. Works? Excellent. Getting the neighbor to stand still while you chase him with it is hard enough without having an easy-to-use chainsaw. Kohlhepp obtained his real estate license in 2006, despite not disclosing his criminal history. His company, TKA Real Estate, grew quickly, and he ran it from his home in Moore, South Carolina, which he purchased for $137,500. As a successful businessman, he also bought 95 acres in Woodruff, South Carolina for $305,632 and surrounded it with a chain-link fence. He continued to leave unsettling comments on Amazon about items such as knives, padlocks, gun accessories, targets, books about emergency surgery, and small shovels. In August 2016, Kohlhepp's violent tendencies resurfaced. In late August, 30-year-old Kayla Brown and her 32-year-old boyfriend Charles Carver were hired to clean Kohlhepp's compound. They were reported missing on August 31st. Spartanburg County Police eventually discovered that both Brown and Carver's cell phones had emitted their last pings in the vicinity of Kohlhepp's home. When police searched Kohlhepp's property, they heard a banging coming from a shipping container on his land and discovered that Brown was trapped inside. Apparently, she had been chained up and raped for about 2 months before she was found. Later on, she would go on to testify that before she was chained up, Carver was shot by Kohlhepp right in front of her. While being arrested, Kohlhepp disclosed the location of 2 additional bodies on his property. These were identified as 29-year-old Johnny Joe Coxey and 26-year-old Megan Leigh McCraw Coxey, who'd gone missing in December 2015 after being hired to clean Kohlhepp's home. Both had been shot and killed. McCraw Coxey had been killed by a gunshot wound to the head on December 25th or 26th, while Coxey had been killed a week earlier by a gunshot wound to the torso. According to the county coroner, they were identified through their extensive tattoos. Kohlhepp was charged with 7 counts of murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of sexual assault. On May 26, 2017, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Todd Kohlhepp or Ted Bundy? Let us know in the comments.